Hey everyone, welcome back to Talk to Tony. I'm excited to share some amazing tips with you today. Let's get right into it. Household income in Singapore has crossed $12,000. Is this real progress or just an illusion? I asked different AI perspectives to debate this issue. Let's explore what it really means for you.
Welcome to the debate. It is Monday, February 9th, 2026, and if you've been following the news wires this morning, you know that the Department of Statistics and the Ministry of Finance have just dropped a landmark data release. We are talking about the Key Household Income Trends 2026 report. The headline figures are, quite frankly, historic. For the first time, the median household income in Singapore has smashed through the ceiling, hitting $12,446. We're seeing real income growth of nearly 7%, and perhaps most surprisingly to some observers, income inequality has dropped to 0.379, the lowest level since records began in 2015.
The numbers are undeniably flashy. On paper, it looks like a victory lap for the administration. But that is exactly why we need to have this conversation today. Because if you step away from the spreadsheets and walk into a hawker center in Toa Payoh or a rental flat block in Badak, the sentiment just doesn't match the statistics. We have a central tension here. Data that screams record prosperity versus a ground reality that whispers struggle. If we are so rich, why does it feel like so many are just treading water?
Well, I think that disconnect is a matter of perspective. Because looking at this report, I see a vindication of the Singaporean social compact. The data proves the efficacy of the model. We aren't just seeing growth at the top, we are seeing aggressive government transfers and policy interventions like the progressive wage model, successfully uplifting the lower quintiles. This is a report card of success in a turbulent global economy.
I come at it from a different angle. I think these record-breaking averages are masking a structural stalling of social mobility and a wealth gap that is becoming, well, cavernous. We are seeing a redefinition of income that glosses over serious liquidity struggles for the poorest families. We need to talk about whether we are becoming a society that is rich on paper but cash poor in practice.
Let's get into the evidence then, because the skepticism seems to ignore the specific breakdown of the growth. If you look closely at the data, this isn't just about the median rising. The most impressive statistic in today's release is the growth at the very bottom. The real income growth for the 20th percentile, our lower-income households, has been growing at 2.9% per annum over the last 5 years. Compare that to the median, which grew at 1.6%. That is the technical definition of inclusive growth. The bottom is catching up to the middle faster than the middle is running away. And when you look at the Gini coefficient, our standard measure of inequality, where 0 is perfect equality, it has dropped to 0.379 after taxes and transfers. That isn't an accident. It's the result of massive targeted government intervention.
I don't dispute the math, but I dispute the story the math is telling. You mentioned the Gini coefficient for income is down. Great! But the Ministry of Finance also released a new occasional paper on wealth today, and that paints a starkly different picture. The Gini for wealth is 0.55. Income helps you pay the electric bill this month. Wealth determines where your children start the race, and that gap is widening significantly. Furthermore, I'm deeply concerned about how we are reaching these record income figures. SingStat has shifted to using market income as the headline. This includes things like imputed rent and CPF payouts.
It includes them because they are real economic resources.
But look at the composition. For the bottom 10%, nearly half of what the government calls income is actually interest earned on their CPF balances. You and I know that CPF interest is money, yes, but it is locked away. You cannot take your CPF interest to the supermarket to buy milk. You cannot use it to pay for your child's tuition today. By counting locked assets as current income, we are technically richer, but practically, many are still cash poor. This explains the disconnect you mentioned in the intro. The statistic says record high, but the wallet feels empty because that money is trapped in the system.
I think you are characterizing the market income definition as some kind of trick, when in reality, it's a necessary modernization. Singapore is aging rapidly. We have a growing demographic of retirees who don't work. If we stick to the old definition of income from work, A household of two 70-year-olds living in a fully paid-up flat with a healthy CPF life payout would look destitute in the data. They have zero work income. But are they poor? No. They have dividends, they have annuities, they have CPF payouts. Including market income captures the reality of a developed economy where capital and savings replace labor as the primary revenue stream for older folks. It's not a sleight of hand, it's precision.
That logic holds for the middle-class retiree with a healthy nest egg. But apply that same lens to the bottom 10%. The report shows that for the lowest decile, only 19.2% of their income comes from actual employment. A staggering 41% is non-employment income, predominantly CPF interest accrual. So here's the problem. If I am a low-income worker and the government statistics say my household income is, say, $3,000, but $1,200 of that is CPF interest locked in a vault until I'm 65, my disposable reality is only $1,800. That creates a gaslighting effect for the working poor. They are told they are doing better than ever, but they can't feel it at the checkout counter.
Gaslighting is a very strong word. The government is transparent about the breakdown in the report, and you are ignoring the other side of the ledger, which is the solution to the liquidity issue you're describing, the transfers. You question why they don't feel it. Maybe they aren't counting the massive state support they receive. In 2025, households in 1- and 2-room HDB flats received an average of $16,519 per household member in transfers.
That includes CPF top-ups, which, again, are not liquid cash.
It includes CPF top-ups, yes, but also GST vouchers, U-Save rebates, and cash supplements. Think about the ROI here. For every dollar of tax paid by lower-income households, they are receiving roughly $7 in benefits. That is a 700% return on investment. The state is effectively subsidizing the daily cost of living to bridge exactly the liquidity gap you are worried about. We are talking about a system where the government pays for the utilities, subsidizes the groceries via vouchers, and tops up the medical accounts. That is why the consumption data remains robust.
But is it enough? Let's look at the Minimum Income Standard, or MIS. This is a study, which, by the way, the government often disputes, that calculates what a person needs not just to survive, but to have a basic standard of living. That means you can buy a birthday present, you can go to a wedding, you can have a meal out once in a while. For a single elderly person, the MIS benchmark is about $1,379 a month. Now look at the schemes. ComCare long-term assistance, about $600. Silver support, maybe $100 to $250. Even stacking the cash vouchers, you're often falling short of that $1,379. So yes, the transfers are generous compared to other countries, but they are patching a hole that is structurally larger than the patch. We are keeping people alive, but are we allowing them to live?
Well, that depends entirely on how you define basic needs. The MIS study includes what I would call aspirational or social spending, buying gifts, hosting cultural festivals, overseas trips. Policy has to prioritize essentials: food, shelter, healthcare. And on those fronts, the safety net is rock solid. But I want to pivot to the wealth argument you raised earlier, because I think the new data there is actually a triumph, not a failure. You mentioned the wealth gap, but look at the floor. The bottom 20% of households in Singapore have an average positive net wealth of $293,000. Do you realize how anomalous that is globally?
I realize it's high, but let's be honest about what that $293,000 is.
It's equity. It's ownership. In the UK or the US, the bottom 20% usually has zero wealth or negative wealth because of credit card debt and student loans. Here, because of the home ownership for all policy, even the poorest families are stakeholders. They hold a nearly $300,000 asset. That is the ultimate safety net. It means they have security of tenure. No landlord can kick them out. That provides a mental and social stability that cash handouts alone cannot buy.
It is a safety net made of concrete. That $293,000 is almost entirely home equity. It's the HDB flat. It's tangible, sure, but it's illiquid. You cannot sell your bedroom to pay for a medical emergency. And unlike a private property owner, an HDB owner in a 2-room flat can't easily downgrade to cash out equity. I mean, there is nowhere cheaper to go. So they are asset-rich on paper, but cash-poor in reality. Contrast this with the top 20%. They hold an average of $5.3 million. And the crucial point here is that their wealth isn't just their house. It is financial assets, shares, bonds, REITs. These are assets that provide liquidity and compound faster than an HDB flat with a decaying lease.
Look, wealth disparity is a feature, not a bug, of a global financial hub. We have to be realistic. If we want to attract capital and talent, we will have high net worth individuals. The Time Out report ranking us the fourth wealthiest city with 242,000 millionaires is a sign of economic health. The question isn't why is the ceiling so high, it's is the floor rising? And with a $293,000 wealth floor, I'd argue it is. Plus, taxing wealth is a logistical nightmare. Capital is mobile. If we try to tax that 5.3 million too aggressively, it moves to Dubai or Hong Kong. Our approach is pragmatic. Tax consumption. The rich spend more, so they pay more GST. Then we take that revenue and funnel it to the bottom. It's efficient.
It's efficient, but it ignores the inflationary pressure of the top on the bottom. When you have that much concentrated wealth, 242,000 millionaires, it drives up the price of everything. Not just luxury cars, but services, food, and social expectations. There's a concept called lifestyle creep, or the cost of social belonging. If the median wedding, angbao, or the expected birthday gift rises because the top end is flush with cash, the poor, whose wealth is locked in HDB concrete, cannot keep up. They become socially isolated. That is a form of poverty that the positive net wealth statistic completely misses. We are creating a society where you can afford to stay alive, but you can't afford to participate.
I think you are conflating general inflation with social pressure. The government manages inflation through monetary policy, and the real income growth of 2.9% for the bottom quintile shows that wages are beating inflation. But let's talk about the future, because the ultimate test of any system is mobility. Can a child born in that two-room rental flat reach the top? The data shows that absolute mobility is strong. The vast majority of children are earning more than their parents did at the same age. Educational attainment is skyrocketing. We are not a stagnant society.
Absolute mobility is the bare minimum. Of course they earn more. The economy has grown. The real test is relative mobility. Can you change your rank? Can you move from the bottom 20% to the top 20%? And this is the part of the MOF paper that actually keeps me up at night. Relative intergenerational mobility has slowed. Those are their words. They tracked children born between 1985 and 1989. Over 25% of those born into the bottom quintile stayed in the bottom quintile as adults. That is a sticky floor. It suggests that talent is becoming less important than the zip code you were born in.
We have to contextualize that. As an economy matures, the rags to riches stories naturally moderate. We aren't a developing nation anymore, where you can jump 5 income brackets just by finishing secondary school. The low-hanging fruit is gone. But we aren't standing still. Look at the progressive wage model, PWM. This is a structural intervention. We are forcing wages up in sectors like cleaning, security, and landscape. We are creating a career ladder where there wasn't one before. That 2.9% real income growth for the bottom 20%, that is the PWM in action. It proves we can engineer mobility through policy.
The progressive wage model is a ladder with missing rungs. We see wage resetting happening constantly. A security officer gets a raise based on tenure, the contract ends, a new agency comes in, and the wage resets to the baseline. It's a game of snakes and ladders where the snakes are structural. And regarding that 25% stickiness, why is it happening? It's because the top 20%, the families with the 5.3 million, are buffering their children. They can afford unpaid internships, enrichment classes, better networks. The meritocracy is being gamed by capital. The poor kid has the HDB flat he can't sell. The rich kid has the network and the liquid cash. That's why mobility is stalling.
I reject the idea that parents doing their best for their children is gaming the system. That is human nature. The government's role isn't to tear down the top, it's to equip the bottom to compete. That's why we have Kids Start. That's why we heavily subsidize tertiary education. We are decoupling the child's destiny from the parent's wallet as much as policy allows. But we must also acknowledge that success looks different in 2026.
It's not just about everyone becoming a CEO. It's about whether a job in the bottom 20% provides a dignified life. And with a median income over $12,000 and nearly $300,000 in assets, I contend that the Singaporean baseline is one of the highest in the world.
And that is where we fundamentally disagree on the definition of dignity. If your wealth is locked up until you are 65 or dead, and 40% of your income is accounting interest, you are living in a state of precariousness. You are one accident away from disaster. The MOF data admits that family background is becoming more influential, not less. If we don't address this, perhaps not with wealth taxes, but with more aggressive interventions in social capital and liquid cash support, we risk becoming a stratified society, a class system disguised as a meritocracy.
I see the risk you are pointing to, but I believe the 2026 data vindicates the Singaporean model. We have avoided the hollowing out of the middle class that has destroyed politics in the West. We have high home ownership. We have aggressive redistribution that lowers the Gini coefficient significantly. The system is adapting. The inclusion of market income isn't a trick. It's a recognition that we are a wealthy, mature society where capital plays a role alongside labor. The record numbers are real. The prosperity is real.
The averages are record-breaking, I will give you that. But averages are dangerous things. If I sit in a room with Elon Musk, the average wealth in that room is billions, but I'm still just a guy with a podcast. The distribution and the composition of that wealth tell a cautionary tale. We have a bottom tier that is asset-heavy but cash-strapped, and a top tier that is pulling away into the stratosphere. The sentiment of being left behind isn't a delusion. It's a rational response to seeing the cost of living rise faster than your disposable cash.
It's clear that while the statistical triumph is evident, the challenge remains in ensuring that the feeling of prosperity is as distributed as the government transfers. The floor has been raised higher than almost anywhere else in the world, but we must ensure the ceiling doesn't become invisible to those standing on that floor.
From becoming a permanent feature of our landscape.
That brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you for joining us on the debate.
Thank you.